Hello. Apparently we are now live on our various platforms. I'm just waiting for it to come up on my own TikTok here. But welcome to what is now quite solidly a weekly live Q&A about what's happening in politics. There's a couple of things I want to focus on from this week. Actually, it's a very, very busy week, a lot happening, but I'll just do a couple of things. But then also please do put your questions into the chat. Just to say, last week I was able to see, I have like the TikTok comments in front of me here, once I can see it here, which I can't yet. But on the other channels, I get them sent to me and I wasn't checking my WhatsApp. So there was one person who was going mad. I said, I keep asking this question, why won't you answer? You said you're going to answer the question. So my apologies for that. If you happen to be listening, try again this time. And I will hopefully remember to check the messages. I'm still not seeing myself here live, but I am, I'm told that we're working. So I'll fire ahead, and hopefully by the time that I come to taking any questions, I'll be able to see it. Ah, yes, here we go. One thing that I was very focused on this week, and I think everybody should be very focused on, is the scandal at CHI, at Temple Street and at Kappa. Last Friday, you had the release of the report, which confirmed what was in the ditch, which is all only as a result of whistleblowers speaking out, which is that 80% of operations in one hospital in Kappa were unnecessary and 60% in Temple Street. So this is a particular type of operation for children with hip dysplasia. It's called an osteotomy. And effectively surgeons have been doing hundreds, well over 1,000, potentially into the thousands of unnecessary surgeries on children. So it's an incredible scandal. It really is. And I think I was the only one, in a way surprisingly, to ask the most basic question and to push for action on it, which is that why on earth are the surgeons who did these, why are they still operating on children? Surely they need to be suspended without prejudice while the audit is being verified, or at the very, very least, stop them doing these operations, these osteotomies. I mean, it seems to me absolutely crazy that they're still doing it. So I raised that on Tuesday night in the debate on CHI with the Minister for Health. I raised it again with the Taoiseach and Leaders' Questions on Wednesday. He said, go to the Medical Council. We'll see. I'd say there's possible there may be some movement on that. I mean, that just seems that the first thing to do is do no more harm. You know, children have been harmed as a result of these operations. And they need to stop doing it. And I gave an example. I mean, I've spoken to a woman who's a mother of a child who was pressurized into doing both sides, or both hips, 2 osteotomies on her first daughter. And then this incredible story where she's back in with her second daughter in Temple Street with an eye condition. And the surgeon who did the hip surgeries, the osteotomies on the first daughter, spots the second daughter, says, oh, I want to have a look at her. And the mother's like, no, you're grand. We had it checked in the Coombe. It's no issue. And he insists, and he logs on, and he looks at the scan. He says, no, she needs both hips done. The mother doesn't trust him correctly, goes back to the Coombe, and the doctor says, no, she doesn't need the operation at all. It's chilling. And just, they had private health insurance. So if he did get the money for the first daughter, €1,500 for the first hip, another $750 for the second hip, and he would have got the same again for the second daughter. Absolutely horrific. And the question's been asked, is that management or surgeons' fault? I think it's both. I think the top surgeons created this culture, and then the management didn't do anything to stop it. They created a culture where we're doing all of these operations. If someone comes in looking like this child comes in looking like this, we're going to do the operation. And I read out an email in the Dáil yesterday from the clinical director at the time of Kappa, and this is back in 2023, I think it was November 2023, saying, basically, we have a problem because we keep getting these surgeries, these osteotomies cancelled, and that's causing a problem in terms of like efficient use of surgery time or whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop having multidisciplinary team meetings before the operations about these cases, and it'll just be up to the surgeon themselves to decide. And what lies behind that is that basically some of the surgeons were pushing ahead to go with these operations. Then they would have these multidisciplinary team meetings, which is normal apparently and the correct practice in terms of before any operation. People sit in a room and say, okay, yeah, this is what we should do. We're sure we're going to do it? Yeah, no problem. And at that meeting, other surgeons were saying, wait a minute, why are we doing these operations? And then they were being cancelled. Instead of that raising a red flag that we're attempting to do far too many of these operations and dealing with that, instead the answer by the clinical director, and this was the senior management was CC'd on this email, was to cancel those meetings entirely and just to say it's purely up to the surgeon. Absolutely crazy situation. The other key thing that we've been pushing for, as well as a public inquiry into all of this, including motive, but is that all children operated on need to be included. So again, I read another email, an internal email that's very recent, inside CHI, suggesting that parents would have to request to be included in a review. The government has not said that, CHI has not said that publicly. I pushed again on that to get a commitment that everybody needs to be reviewed. Of course there needs to be consent, but we need to go looking for consent from all of these parents, or if the children are now adults, of those people who maybe were wrongly operated on. So it shouldn't just be about looking for complications. It should be reviewing, did they get an unnecessary surgery? And then the other key thing pushing is that if you look at what's being published, they're saying they're going to go back to 2010 and review the operations from then. But these operations started in 2002, and I don't understand why they aren't all being included. They all need to be included. There's other issues. The surgeon involved in the springs, all of his surgeries need to be investigated, not just on children, also on adults. I've been contacted by adults who have been affected. So this is huge. We're going to keep on it. Just having a look at the comments. Someone asked, will there be a list of who voted yes or no on the hunt ban? There will be. We can get that up. We can just it's available on the Oireachtas website, but we can do a link. That's in relation to the ban on fox hunting, where it was only a first stage debate. So it's normally these just all go through on the nod, and then there's a debate at second stage and a vote yes or no if you agree with the thing. Whereas here, Michael Collins from Independent Ireland called a vote to stop it even going forward to that stage because he's so in favour of fox hunting. And in the Dáil, the Independent Ireland people, Donny Healy-Rae, Aontú, and joined disgracefully by Sinn Féin, voted not to allow the bill to go any further. Thankfully, Labour, Social Democrats supported it, our group supported it, and the government supported it, not because they actually support a ban on fox hunting, but because they recognise that you shouldn't stop something at first stage. You should allow a debate to actually happen about it. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, and then I'll get to more of the questions, is the I might check the WhatsApp first. Give me 2 seconds. Someone asking, how far back is that, Paul Rees, CHI operations, on Instagram, I think. So these operations, we know from an academic paper that was published later, they go back to 2002. They started doing this new type of operation. I think they're called a less invasive osteotomy. They started them in Temple Street and in Kappa, and they should include all the operations. The other thing to say is, obviously there was a lot of activity correctly in the Dáil and outside the Dáil, very powerful protest about the Irish government doing everything it can to stop genocide. The government last night voted down, disgracefully, a bill to stop the Irish Central Bank facilitating the sale of and authorising the sale of Israeli war bonds throughout the European Union, and the government voted it down. The government's dragging its feet in the Occupied Territories Bill. I'm going to be in later debating Simon Harris in relation to that, and there's still done nothing about the overflights. So we'll be continuing to fight on that. But the other thing, there was a first hearing today in the Defence Committee, which I went to, about what's called a pre-legislative scrutiny on heads of bill, right? So it's like the draft law that they're going to get rid of the triple lock. So the top civil servants in the Department of Defence came in. It was actually very revealing. So some headlines. They admitted that this is about a removal of the triple lock. It's not about reforming the triple lock. Secondly, they admitted to me that if the triple lock hadn't been in place and the Irish government had wanted to, they could have sent troops to participate in the invasion of Iraq. Right? That without the triple lock, the Irish government, which remember allowed the US military to use Shannon Airport for the invasion of Iraq, could have sent Irish troops to participate in the invasion of Iraq. There's nothing in the law to stop that, whereas under the triple lock they wouldn't have been able to do so. So that's a really clear illustration that this is about neutrality. Thirdly, they admitted that if they get rid of the triple lock, an Irish government can send troops abroad anywhere in the world, effectively for any purpose, because it's not just for peacekeeping, it's for international security. And on NATO-led missions, on Coalition of the Willing missions. Like, it was interesting because these civil servants are obviously in favour of getting rid of the triple lock, but they're like pretty open and admitting that it frees the government hand to send troops wherever to participate in whatever imperial adventure, basically led by the US. Yeah, it's pretty shocking. James Stokes, hi James, on Instagram asked, what's the best way to stop this? Do protesters need to continue to disrupt the government like what was done on the night of the discussion in the Dáil? Yeah, I think we need to do everything we can. So I think, for example, we, like, 3 protesters from Palestine Action Era went into Shannon Airport a couple of weeks ago and tried to stop a US warplane on the way to Israel to participate in the genocide. I think they're to be applauded, not criminalised. They should be heroes. So action like that, I think action like outside the Dáil, action inside the Dáil, action in our trade unions who have actually been quite, active in participating, and just everything we can to build pressure on the government to force the government to do everything that it can. Because really, like, their line, I've said it a few times now, but their line really is, when you listen to it, we're less complicit in genocide than other Western states. Which in a sense is true, because the other Western states are literally arming and funding the genocide. The Irish government isn't doing that, and they kind of want to be patted in the back for that, and we have to say that's not good enough. There's a genocide happening. The Irish government now admits there's a genocide happening after they didn't use that word for 19 months of it happening. But if there's actually a genocide, you admit there's a genocide, well, why on earth don't we have full sanctions on Israel? Why on earth are we allowing the airlines to break the law by bringing military, weapons, munitions through our airspace? Why did you vote down a bill to stop the authorization of Israeli war bonds being sold to fund this genocide? Thanks, Moira, on Facebook. I'll have a look just through other... one question. Why do you believe the Irish government isn't fully supporting Palestine? I think that to the degree that they're supporting Palestine, as in they are saying calling to genocide, they're criticizing Israel, they've recognised the state of Palestine, that's because of pressure from below and the sentiment of ordinary people, which is overwhelmingly pro-solidarity with Palestine. If they had their own way, they wouldn't do any of that. Because in reality, they're more attuned to the EU and the US. And they're the biggest supporters of Israel. The US is funding all of this, but the EU and European countries are second only after the US. Von der Leyen went to Israel, gave a green light for the genocide, and they don't want to cause, tension in their relationship with the US or the EU or anyone else. And those things are ultimately more important than children's lives. I was having a chat with someone actually out after the protest, or after the Dáil. I went out to the protest last night outside the Dáil, and someone was saying just why? And I was explaining, for me, the anti-war movement about the war in Iraq was a profound realization that this system doesn't care about human lives. It's about profit, it's about power, it's about strategic interests. They just sometimes pretend to care about human lives. And that's the truth. And that's the same logic as what lies behind this genocide being allowed to happen and being funded to happen. For Western powers, Israel is an enormous strategic ally in a crucial area in the world, even if they're kind of an unstable ally. They don't always like exactly what they do, but they're key and they need to support them. What do you think of TikTok channels like Pablo Bosque spreading the left? Yes. Big up Pablo Bosque and similar. What am I actually for? Terence asks. Not what you're against. What are you adding to the political sphere? So I'm an eco-socialist. I think our society should be organised fundamentally different. At the moment, I think that profit comes first. You have private ownership of the key sections of the economy, and profit is what decides what happens. Instead, so as a socialist, I think we should have democratic public ownership of the key sections of our economy, and we should plan to meet people's needs, including our need to live in a safe environment. So what that would mean, very practically, is a state construction company to build social and affordable housing at a massive scale to resolve the housing crisis. What it would mean is building an Irish National Health Service, taking the private hospitals out of private control, taking the profit motive out of healthcare. We've seen the disgusting, perverse impact of that and distorting impact of that in relation to the CHI scandal, and providing quality healthcare for everybody in a one-tier single health service. It would mean dealing with the climate crisis by rolling out retrofitting people's homes, solar panels, insulation, reducing people's bills, giving people warm homes, investing in massively expanded free and frequent public transport to get people out of their cars. It would mean not spending all our energy on data centres. You can read the front page of the Irish Independent today, a senior civil servant saying, with a choice between AI and housing, the government chooses AI, we choose housing. It would mean a foreign policy based on consistent solidarity with the oppressed, opposition to all imperialism, and fighting for a society where ordinary people are in control, a democratic, eco-socialist society. Linda asks, why is it taking you so long to achieve all you were saying for the Irish people, as I haven't seen any? Because we're not in government. Is a big part of it. Unfortunately, we didn't win the last election. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, with their lies in the election, won the election together with the right-wing independents who are backing them up. So they have a majority. They can ignore us in the Dáil, let's say on the triple lock or on the housing crisis, which is going to get worse, or in terms of special needs, which is going to get worse. So we can't win on our own by being small voices, small number of TDs in the Dáil. The only way we win is like we saw with the water charges, people power movements, like we're seeing on Palestine, but we also need to see that on special needs. There's a protest Saturday week, 2 p.m, Garden of Remembrance, equality and education protest, very, very important. Please be there if you can. Then there's a protest to defend our neutrality on the 14th of June, and there's a protest, Raise the Roof, to demand a declaration of a housing emergency and outline what that would look like on the following Tuesday outside the Dáil. And then the first Saturday in July, there's a CATU protest. Those kind of protests, building social movements, that's how we'll win the change that we need to see. Sorry, some more messages on the blah blah blah. None of the children will send their own children to fight in a war. We agree. They're against EU regulations. Yes, that's what they say. They didn't even, in terms of why they didn't vote for why they opposed the ban Israeli bonds bill. Their own people didn't even buy this. It was actually interesting. Gillian O'Toole, who's one of these Lowry independents who has a deal with the government, voted with the opposition last night. And the reason she gave was because the government keeps talking about, it's against EU law, blah, blah, blah. But they haven't provided any details of in what way it actually is. Bit off topic, but since it's Traveller Pride Week, why doesn't the government do more for the traveller community? Because I don't think they care, really. Occasionally they're forced by some level of public pressure, but Jesus, you look at across the country, the only budgets that aren't spent in terms of traveller housing. Travellers remain probably the most oppressed, discriminated against group in Irish society, and the establishment political parties are happy enough to play an anti-traveller racist card when it suits them. People might remember the infamous leaflet from Josepha Madigan, who went on to be a minister. I don't think she's a TD anymore. She didn't stand in the last election, but talking about how providing traveller accommodation was a waste of valuable resources. Horrendous stuff. Why are you taking the working class money to pay for counter protests? I don't know what you're talking about, Johnny. When will we begin to prioritise Irish citizens, asks Patrick. For me, I think who we need to prioritise is ordinary people. For me, the division in society isn't between a black person, a white person, or an Irish person, and a whatever, a Polish person who lives in Ireland. It's between ordinary people who suffer from the housing crisis, renters, people who are trying to buy a house, people who are living at home, and those who profit. And those who profit are a mixture of Irish landlords and big multinational vulture funds who are also profiting. Like, that's the division in society, and we need to unite all ordinary people. And that's why, you know, the stuff that tries to blame refugees, asylum seekers, or just immigrants in general, tries to blame those for the housing crisis. I think those people, whether they know it or not, are working for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, trying to divert anger away from the government, away from the landlords, away from the developers, away from those who profit from these crises, towards vulnerable people who have no hand nor part in the making of these crises. Ricky O'Mahony says, thoughts on illegal immigrants in our country. There aren't illegal immigrants in our country. You see these people saying it a lot, but people have, what people mean, I presume by that, is people who come here and then apply for asylum. People have the right to come here and apply for asylum. You have the right to apply for asylum once you get to a country, and then you're in a legal process while you've applied for asylum. That's, you know, so people talk about illegal immigrants, but then, and then it's clear illegal immigrants is meant to make in your mind this kind of fearful person that you should be scared of, but then that's kind of swiftly moves on to all immigration and everyone's under the same thing. And if you listen to like the organisers of some of these anti-immigrant protests, they're very very open. People like Malachy Steenson, that this is about all immigration they're looking to stop. I don't know how they plan to staff our health service, for example, if you want to stop all this immigration, or even if you want to engage in what they call remigration, which is forcible deportation of immigrants in this country, including people who are legally here. Exactly, Confkins. Patrick says, if surely you've contributed all your life to a state, you should be prioritised above illegals. Again, like, illegals isn't a thing, right? This is the language of Nigel Farage and stuff, but like, there aren't illegal people. Of course, in reality, like, if you have been here and contributing, you are prioritised above people who don't have stamps, for example, who haven't been on the council housing list. You know, there is a prioritisation of people. Sorry, don't know what happened here. Oh, I've randomly clicked on another channel. 1 second, and I'll go back. I'm presuming we're still here. There we are, yes. Sorry, I messed myself up there, so I'll just wait for one new. Do I call a socialist? If so, top 5 socialists, go. Wow. James Connolly, Karl Marx, Rosa Luxemburg, Lenin, Trotsky. Is that 5? We'll throw Engels in there as well. Why all men? Linda asks. I included Rosa Luxemburg, but I think you're talking about immigrants, and then they're not all men. This is what they like to say. They're not all men. About a third are children. In terms of asylum seekers, a third are children, and a third are women. Jonah Hurley asks, what are the main differences between PVP and other parties on the left, like Soc Dems and Labour? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big difference, really. We work together very well. We're working together in a whole range of coalitions now, from the Together for Neutrality, Raise the Roof, on the Equality in Education campaign. But, like, there's a very big difference, which is that we're socialists. We don't believe that the current capitalist system can be reformed to be made into a decent, humane society. We stand for a fundamental revolutionary change of society. That's like the fundamental difference. And then what flows from that is, like, we say we will not go into coalition with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. We want to see a left government committed to eco-socialist change. Whereas, obviously, Labour has gone into coalition, which has been disastrous for ordinary people again and again and again. They implemented water charges. We were devastated as a result. And the Social Democrats are open to doing that in the future. Patrick says, the left are facilitating wage suppression. Big business loves mass migration. See, the answer to the bosses trying to use immigration to drive down wages is to unionise all workers and to fight for decent wage conditions for all. I was involved in helping to organise the Gamma workers. You might remember this, a long time ago now. The guts of 20 years ago, these were workers, Turkish workers, working on a building site, earning $1.40 an hour. So the Socialist Party exposed it. Joe Higgins exposed it in the Dáil. The workers went on strike. We got them to join a union, SIP2. And well, they actually had already officially been in a union, SIP2, but weren't getting anything forward initially. They went on strike and they won equal terms and conditions to other workers. So that's the way to do it. But if you play into the hands of dividing people and seeing immigrant workers as a problem, you're really playing into the hands of the bosses. Okay, Patrick, I think we don't agree, but that's fine, no problem. Pablo Bosque, yes, I gave a thumbs up already to Pablo Bosque. I don't know what Mark McMillan I can't answer. Oh, will you still support if you're a family member end up a victim of an immigrant? Yeah. My politics don't change based on if some, like, you know, I've been the victim of crime by what probably was a white Irish person. I've been the victim of crime, in terms of someone robbed my car. I saw it on the camera. I don't now hate white Irish people. It doesn't change my policy. It doesn't mean I think, you know, they should all be criminalised or whatever. So you'll have good and bad in every sort and every colour. And I think it's weird the way, like, it's really consciously done on social media. People try to demonise particular people by taking videos and implying that, like, everyone's the same, you know. Anyway, and division fuels huge corporations, absolutely. Sorry, I'll check my other messages. Yeah, I agree with you there. And Stephen on Instagram. Ricky on Instagram asked about any hope for a left alliance or pre-election pact for the next general election. Yes, we would be hopeful. See, Mark McMillan, sorry, I know I keep getting distracted by you. Rubber boat bandits. Do you just watch GB News all day or something? People aren't arriving here in rubber boats. What the hell are you talking about? Why are you dehumanizing people? People who are fleeing from, like, horrific situations created by the governments of big Western powers. There's no such thing as, you know, rubber boat bandits. That's a horrific way to talk about people. So I'm not going to be engaging with you any further. We don't agree on this, and you've just clearly swallowed a load of Nigel Farage nonsense. The same people who supported the occupation of this country would support probably the reoccupation of this country. You should be looking to our own history of fighting against colonialism and seeing we should be on the same side as the oppressed around the world, not kicking down. Sorry, I was in the middle of any hope for a left alliance or pre-election pact at the next general election. I would hope so. Yeah, I would hope so. For us, it's crucial that should be based on a commitment not to go into government with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So you give people a genuine choice, that they don't end up voting for you thinking they're getting change and then they end up with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael back in. And secondly, based on a radical programme that would actually transform people's lives, which means taking on the big developers, the big corporate landlords, taking on the private health corporations, taking on the polluting big businesses. Would you not consider PVP to be as far left as Gript or as far right? Yeah, probably. But we don't go crying about it. We don't mind people calling us far left. We're openly socialist. Whereas, Jesus, if you call anyone on the right, far right, we're like, oh, you're calling us far right. I don't know why people are such snowflakes about it, that they can't just embrace the reality of what they are. Why is there no speech and language therapists in special needs schools? Sorry, I missed that one. There are going to be, actually, at least in theory. The government has committed to putting therapists into special schools. In reality, you should have therapists in all schools. The problem is, at the moment, they're planning to get those therapists from the CDNTs, which is currently the big waiting list that people are on. And therefore, they're kind of just moving around inadequate resources. Like, what we need is a lot more therapists. We're not training up enough therapists in most kind of therapy, in like OT or whatever, or speech and language. They might be training between kind of 30 to 40 a year, and we should be over 100 being trained a year. So we need to massively expand college access, as well as recognise international qualifications and attract people back into this country and back into the public health service. User 6108. 840124334 says, well, you won't be getting voted in. Well, I've bad news for you, user. What are the war bonds with Israel through our central bank, Ireland? Yeah, that's basically to sell bonds in the European Union. You need to get a central bank in the European Union to authorise the sale of those bonds, and the Irish Central Bank has authorised the sale of Israeli bonds. And these bonds, you could Google Israeli bonds, and you'll find the website. They're like advertised as being used for the war effort. I think, by the way, the comments I'm getting are a bit later here, which is maybe why. Yeah, Noel Monaghan is absolutely right. We've never had a left-wing government. We've always had right-wing governments. So you support right-wing policies. I mean, you support the current situation, which has seen 15,000 people homeless, which sees 15,000 children on waiting lists for assessments of needs, which sees hundreds of children without appropriate school places. It's a crazy situation. That's all the product of successive governments, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael governments. So O says, why should GRIP not have a voice but PVP have a voice? GRIP absolutely should have a voice, just like PVP has a voice, as a political organisation. And just as the media outlets connected to PVP, be it Rupture or Rebel, they absolutely have full freedom of speech, and GRIP should absolutely do that as well. What we deny is the idea that PVP's media outlets or the right wing's media outlets should be treated as if they are, legitimate, non-biased media outlets, because they're not. They have a definite agenda. You won't find any other media outlet that donated to a political party. That's what Gript did. So we're not talking about shutting down Gript or anything like that. They have every right to go on, and I'm really happy to go and debate with Gript, with John McGurk or Ben Scallon or whatever on radio shows, but engage with them as what they are, which is a political force, part of the right-wing political movement in this country, as opposed to pretending that they are a legitimate media outlet. It is a Zionist-run propaganda pushing far-right news, bullshit news outlet. Correct. People trying to say that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael aren't right-wing. I mean, they are right-wing. They're not far-right. I'm not saying that they're far-right. But they're right-wing. They're implementing right-wing, neoliberal economic policies. They've pursued extremely conservative social policies throughout the years. When's the next Ireland for All march? There's a march against racism on the... There's a Love Ireland, Hate Racism march on... Is it the 20... Let me check. 22nd of June? 21st of June? 21st of June. 22nd of June. Sorry. Thank you. Childcare cost updates. Not much updates. Government's dragging its feet. Made a load of promises during the election. They've all kind of disappeared afterwards. The basic point, and I'll finish up shortly, because I have to go and debate with Simon Harris about the Occupied Territories Bill, is that we should have a public childcare system. It's mad. The current system's absolutely mad. It doesn't work for parents who have to pay loads of money, £1,000 a month. It doesn't work for many childcare operators, small ones, who are forced, completely burdened by bureaucracy. It doesn't work for the childcare workers, who are great, doing a really great job, but completely underpaid. The only ones it works for are the big operators, the giraffes, the big kind of multi-operators. They're making big money. So instead, we need a public system, just like we have a public system for second level education. Gordon, how does it feel to know you will never get elected again after this term? Gordon, how does it feel to make the same comments that people made to me 9 months ago before the last election, and then I got re-elected? There's obviously no guarantee I get elected next time, but all these people who make very confident predictions who are never getting elected again, you're getting started very, very early this time around, 6 months after the last election. You might want to leave it a couple of years when we're a bit closer to the next election before you predict my demise, and you can sound very, very confident, and then we can see again. Are they trying to change the Occupied Territories Bill? Yeah, they're trying to scrap it, replace it with their own bill, but massively watered down form without services. But that's part of what I'm going to be debating with Simon Harris very shortly. I finish on this one. Someone on Instagram, Ivan, I think. Do you think the cancer of this country for people voting blindly for Fianna Fáil Fine Gael because their great-grandfather supporters opposed the treaty will ever be ended? I think it is ending. I mean, if you go back to the late 70s, between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they got a combined vote of over 80%. It's crazy, they completely dominated politics. That's now down to the low 40s, right? So it was kind of declining gradually, and then the crisis hit, and it declined like aggressively, and now the decline has slowed down again, but it's still declining. And I think it's up to the left to offer a real alternative, and a big part of that is no coalition with Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, to show that there can be a real alternative. I should call out Ben Scallon for the fact he's a failed IFP candidate. Exactly, that's a very good example. Noreen, the election was rigged. Unfortunately, I don't think it was. Unfortunately, in the sense that not that I'm in favour of being rigged, but unfortunately, I think people did vote for Fianna Fáil Fine Gael, 40-something% of them. Not because they love Fianna Fáil Fine Gael, but because they were scared. They were told to be scared that things are all right, and if you take a risk, things can go terrible, and so on. The government did lie about the housing figures, for example, and then I think the opposition, in particular Sinn Féin, failed to put forward a coherent alternative. They didn't have a governmental alternative because they wouldn't rule out coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and because they allowed the government and the media to set the agenda in terms of immigration. They played into their hands by accepting that immigration is the problem, by distracting from the cause of the problem of Fianna Fáil Fine Gael in terms of housing crisis and everything else. So, yeah, that's what I mean. All right. I'll go for now. Thanks for joining me for the engagement. I'll be back next week. Not actually on Thursday, now that I think about it, but maybe on the Friday. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Good to chat. I say goodbye.